Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Real Talk with Dr. Deen. I've got a special guest, the scientist, Shariq Ali Khan. Shariq, assalamu alaikum, how are you?
Wa alaikum salam, alhamdulillah, I'm very well, how are you?
Great, thanks for joining.
Thank you, welcome.
Tell us a bit about your background. How did you get interested in science?
Yeah, so I did study science and I was always fascinated by it. I can say that since my early childhood, the space race took place back then, and I was really captivated by all the, progress and innovation. And it went sort of parallel to the acquiring the Deen. And I did study science and graduate in biology, but I was always open to the bigger picture. I didn't want to end up in a lab.
Yeah,
that's would be your typical scientist. I didn't want to be that. I'm more interested in the knowledge and the essence of. I like exploring knowledge and all kinds of knowledge. So multidisciplinary knowledge. So I did graduate in science, but I'm not actually working as a scientist. I'm working in IT and ICT and in science publishing, etc. So that's where the money is. But I've always read up on science and try to build the bridge between religions and science, and what have Muslims done in the past to contribute to science, these kind of questions, but also how can we be certain about the truth, what is the truth, and how does scientific progress and innovation play into that. So this borderline between science and religion, but also between philosophy and history, languages even, though that interests me a lot.
So what's interesting about that is we live in a world of science, logic, rationale, evidence. Can everything be proven through science in terms of our faith?
In terms of our faith, there is always a limitation to human knowledge. So Allah says that in the Quran as well. Obviously, we cannot understand everything. So we are limited by our senses, by our perception, by our aql, ilm, hikmah. This logical chain is there, it's given, but it's, all it can lead to is a limited sort of level of iman, a yaqeen from a human perspective. So we cannot know everything. Right. We can know as much as we can perceive, and we can push the boundary. But I believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there with his revelation to fill the gaps and to actually encourage us to explore more. As he says in the Quran, travel through the earth and see what was the end. Travel through the earth and how I made creation happen. These kind of statements are everywhere in the Quran. So it's a challenge to us. But Allah also issues the challenge in the Surah Al-Mulk that our senses are limited, that our eyes will, if we repetitively observe, our eyes will get tired before we can actually, fulfill that completion of our knowledge.
Give me something fascinating that you found in the Quran or in science that really fascinates you.
Every time I read scientific literature and I compare it to the Quran, there's something new that comes up. Even the Sunnah and the Hadith.
Give me some examples.
So what's surprising to me, what was an eye-opener, was that the depth of the mountains, for example, is encoded in the Quran. Also, if I've looked at astronomy, so it's not only the Big Bang, the smoke-like structure of the universe before matter comes together, and then the expansion of the universe, but it's also, the relationship there between space-time and the Earth's age. So the actual correlation between the age of the universe and the age of the earth is given in numbers. The speed of light is given in numbers.
In the Quran?
Yes, the speed of light can be deducted from Quranic verses. And at the same time, also, if you look at the Hadith, our Prophet ﷺ mentioned the exact chronology of creation. How
in which way
he mentioned in an explicit hadith, which is I'm outlining in my book, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gives the allegory of a week, right, from Saturday to Friday, and he mentions how everything was created from the mountains to the clay to the plants and the animals in the exact precise chronology. And then funny enough, light occurs after life, and that would sound like somewhat of a contradiction, because photosynthesis is essential for life. But if you look deeper into modern research, into cutting-edge research, you will see that at the bottom in the ocean, there are extremophile bacteria living, feeding off thermonuclear vents, which are entirely isolated from the surface ecosystem, no sunlight needed, and now biologists postulate that that might have been the original form of life, living off the geothermal energy of the planet rather than solar energy. So not all life is dependent on solar energy. There's an entire ecosystem that these archaeobacteria, these extremophile bacteria feed. And Prophet ﷺ said that there was life before light. The Al-Shajara, the tree of life, began before light. And then the chronology ends very nicely with Friday afternoon, after Asr, shortly before Maghrib, Adam alayhi salam was created and creation was completed, right? So Prophet ﷺ knew exactly the chronology of creation and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it happen, in which sequence and which chronology. And if you look at the time scale, if you look at these 7 days and you subdivide them into epochs and eras, you take a day not as a 24-hour day, but as an epoch or an era, because the term yom is a relative term. It is a flexible term. It can be interpreted as an epoch, era, age.
Right. Interesting. So, you know, in the world we live in today, you got Richard Dawkins, Lawrence Krauss, all these neo-atheists, and they're really pushing the ideas of, you know what, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. And then there's all these theories like string theory, multiverse. We're living in some sort of simulation, right? Yeah. How, as a Muslim or even anybody, how do you grapple with these ideas?
I grapple very well with them. It's just that I haven't been given the platform to debate these people.
I'm giving it to you now. So
I was a very big fan of Richard Dawkins until the neo-Darwinist evolutionist creationist debate became imminent. But back in the early 90s when I was studying, his book The Selfish Gene was one of my cult books. But I never thought that he would take it as far as to actually, become a militant atheist. So I would love to debate the guy. I have debated Dawkins actually online, and I've also seen him face to face and spoken with him, and also with Stringer. But I haven't been given a platform of a formal debate, because I would deliver the arguments in a way that they could not be refuted. Inshallah.
So Richard Dawkins has said that teaching religion is child abuse.
Yes, he said that.
What are your thoughts on that?
So you can then teaching any kind of moral would be child abuse, right? Any kind of perspective. I mean, I sort of know where he's coming from. He's coming from the end of compulsive teaching, where you don't give the free space for inquisitiveness, curiosity, thought, and where the child cannot question anything. And I agree with him that kind of fascistoid teaching of religion, of any ideology, is wrong.
Yeah. So you're saying there should be, and this is the key thing here.
This is the key.
Kids and youth need to be able to question our religion and find the answers.
That's right.
How do we give those answers?
That's a very good question, actually. So the fact of the matter is that we are all lacking the ability. Most of us, 95% of us, are lacking the ability to actually fulfill that kind of educative need. So this process, this age that begins with the age of 3, where the child starts asking why, when, how, why, that is a fascinating age. That is exactly the age where you need to nurture these questions and not shush them, not declare them taboo. Whatever question, nothing is off limits. And only if you can give the answer yourself and satisfy the child, then I think the platform is given to teach Islam properly. And we haven't got that. We're far away from that. I'm giving hints as to I'm giving instruction manuals on how to conduct that process. So I've got the book out.
So how do we get those misconceptions about Islam to the youth and to generally everybody?
Yes.
What's the way?
The misconceptions are what you good brothers and sisters are doing. Communication, broadcasting, promotion, propagation against the leading narrative that Islam is vile and wrong and false. We have to uphold the value, not only the values, but I find Islam and Islamic teaching, history, philosophy, theology, and science an adventure. And that's how we have to present it. We have to fascinate people by that process of acquiring knowledge. We have to fascinate the children. And,
How do we fascinate
it's interesting that on one hand, we have so many conversions because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is spreading His deen. Yeah. But on the other hand, we have a youth crisis, as you always emphasize yourself.
Exactly.
And that youth crisis, that's an oxymoron. Why should we have a youth crisis when all the adults are converting once they learn about it, right?
Muslim youth feel Islam doesn't answer their questions, doesn't have solutions. So what do you say to that?
Well, the problem is we are rooting our Islam not in Islam, not in the Quran, not in the Hadith. We are rooting it in culture and in false tradition. So obviously the children smell that there's something foul there, right? And that's what deviates them. What we need to give them is certainty, yaqeen. This logical chain of aql, the perception, the senses, ilm, the knowledge that you acquire with them, hikmah, the wisdom, and then moving on to iman and yaqeen. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran right at the beginning, this Quran is for those with certainty of the hereafter, right? So that's certainly how is it acquired. It's acquired through inquisition. And when you actually inquire and ask again and again, inquisitiveness, curiosity, you nurture that and nothing off limit, and you get the right answers, or you get answers that are to your satisfaction. That will give us that level of
Shariq, we're just going to go to a break. We're going to continue with the debate on atheism and our youth. So don't go anywhere. Join us after the break. Real Talk with Dr. Deen. Welcome back to Real Talk. So Shariq, I've interviewed Muslim youth at universities. I had some medical students, and the student, out of all of them, they all said some of their friends have doubts about Islam. Some of them have become atheists. And one of the students said, 20 to 30% of my friends have become atheists. But no one in the community knows. There's a complete denial. I've regularly over the years had calls from parents whose Muslim kid has become an atheist, and they don't have anyone to, like you said, answer that question. So if somebody is Muslim and becomes an atheist, what would you say to them?
That's a difficult one because Iman is not purely based on reasons. Iman is always, always an emotion of emotion, an element of emotion with it. It's a mix. Your heart has to be convinced as well, right? So, and those are subjective signs you receive from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your life, in direct communication with Allah and events that He makes happen for you. So there's, obviously there's nature, the Quran, and all the signs that are officially there. And then there's the unofficial subjective narrative that you have as an individual, that Allah gives you. So Allah has chosen to misguide people, because of certain deeds, certain
but if your child said, I don't believe in Allah anymore, would you just say it's emotions?
It will be an emotional discussion in the beginning, of course. The arguments...
But what if I'm in the world of science and logic? Yes. I don't need emotions. I want to see the data.
Yes.
Then what?
Well, then in that case, what you have to understand that the evidence is there. The evidence is in the Quran, in astronomy, geology, biology, and mathematics and numerology of the Quran, and the mathematical miracles of the Quran, and the grammar. And there's an unlimited amount of evidence in the Quran. The fact of the matter is that if people don't want to accept that because their heart has been pulled away from Islam, because they don't like Muslims, they don't like being identified as a Muslim, they will find reasons to cover that up. That's kufr, right?
What if someone genuinely is confused? It's not malice, it's not evil. Genuinely, I've studied science. Islam doesn't make sense. The Prophet went up and a white horse to the heavens, and these things are like what Richard Dawkins says.
Yes.
And I just don't get it.
Yes.
How do we talk to a young person, someone's born Muslim in a Muslim home, says, I'm just going to be an atheist now. Okay. I don't need religion in my life.
What age approximately?
A university student or college student.
Okay, well, that's a bit late, to be quite honest.
It's a bit late.
That's a bit late, to be quite honest. You have to start with the children. Yes, where Dawkins said you're indoctrinating, you're abusing the child. No, we're trying to nurture, knowledge and the love for learning and understanding and questioning. And that's what we should be doing from early on with all our children. They should go, because we haven't got a formal religious educational system in the country, we should do that as parents at home. We should use books, and the books we are using are mostly not instruction manuals on science and religion. of course,
Right.
and this is something, a gap I'm trying to fill up, because we're living in the age of science and technology. So some Muslims are to blame, because we are happy to use satellite phones in the desert, but we don't believe that there was a moon landing, right? And there are contradictions. People are happy to use, and children see that. Children see that gap. We have to fill the gap between science and religion. We have to bring Muslims closer to science again, because once upon a time, not too long ago, we were the inventors. We were the pioneers of science, right? In Andalus, in Spain, in the golden age of Baghdad. We were actually setting the milestones. We were setting the stakes higher and higher back then. And the Northern Europeans were copying from Andalus in Spain.
Do we as Muslims believe in UFOs and aliens?
We do. And they are actually mentioned in the Quran. The question is, how do you define life, alien life? Do you define it as a carbon-based life that you can touch, feel, smell? Or will you accept that the life can be in another dimension or parallel to us that we cannot perceive, which is al-ghaib, which is the jinnat, right? Yeah. So Allah mentions it right at the beginning of the Quran, al-alamin, and at the end, min al-jinnati wan nas. So the Quran is full of descriptions of the jinn. There is even a surah of jinns in communication with the jinn. There are statements on how Allah created the jinn before us. So the jinn are an alien species, right?
So you're saying unidentified flying jinns?
No. The UFOs sightings nowadays, I'm 100% convinced they are some sort of prototypes from either, our known civilizations, the Chinese, the Russians, or North Koreans, or whatever. But there is a small chance that there are also unknown civilizations on planet Earth. So I don't believe that anyone could travel millions of light years from another planet to Earth. But I mean, if you look, mostly people are looking for carbon-based life or silicon-based life, molecular-based. But people are not looking for actual. But I mean, it depends on the fascination that you have for science and nature, because look, we have 5 kingdoms in creation. We have bacteria, we have viruses, we have plants, we have animals and fungi, right? And biologist classes and animals. That's a separate discussion. But you see so much beauty in Allah's creation, so much multitude, so much variation and variety. Those are alien species essentially to us, aren't they? So the planet Earth, if you once open your eye towards it, is filled up with marvel. I know there's a gap. Yeah. There's a vacuum for humans to discover, explore, and be fascinated by the aliens or by something unknown. We have so much that is unknown and unexplored on planet Earth.
So in terms of like the top miracles of nature that you've discovered, like in your studies, what like the top 5 miracles of nature from Allah?
I would state one of the big eye-openers to me was, for example, the fact that we have 114 surahs in the Quran. Yeah. And there are exactly 114 stable elements in the periodic table of elements, for example. So the numerical miracles of the Quran are amazing, and they are endless actually, and they're being discovered on a weekly or daily basis.
Can you give some more examples like that?
Well, for example, the Surah Al-Hadith, which has the atomic weight and number of iron encoded of that very isotope that is created in the supernova. So you can see it in the surah and ayat number. And if you compare it to the table of elements, it's an isotope of iron which is originally created in the supernova. So I'm fascinated by the fact, there's such an endless chain of proofs in the Quran, beginning from the very well-known.
So why can't we use those proofs for use and not just emotions? I agree, emotions are important.
Well, the atheists try to refute maybe 1 or 2 surahs, and then they say, verses rather, and then when the waterfall of evidence overflows them, they say, oh, you're just making this up, this is all rubbish. And then you come with the evidence that the Quran has not been abrogated. We have the Birmingham manuscripts, it's even in secular possession, it's been carbon dated, it hasn't changed, we didn't add anything on it. Then they just back off and say, all right, they come with absurd stuff like, oh, the Arabs were advanced. They might have done research in embryology. They might have cut open the wombs. They might have this and that. So they were advanced. They knew. But then on the other end, they're comfortable to say they were just copying the Greeks, right? And they don't want to admit that we've done a lot of innovation. But all of a sudden, we are all knowing and know the microscopic, embryology. And we know, all of a sudden, we know everything. So, they are just as emotional. You have to see that. So it's a lot about emotion. You have to emotionally capture
why are you so passionate about
early on.
You're so passionate about this subject. Where's it come from?
The passion comes from the fact that I've been reading science and religion since the age of five, I can remember, both in parallel. And that's what we need to nurture in children. We need to, I believe that is, an advantage to have. This combination of science and religion. I believe the polymaths that we had, the big polymaths, Ibn Sina, Rabi, Al-Farabi, etc., they were just like that, interdisciplinary. I speak 5 languages.
Yeah.
I read history, philosophy, science, arts, and I read politics, and I also read theology.
And they were polymaths. And so do you think there's been a cover-up of history like
yes.
the Dark Ages, they call, which was actually golden age of civilization? Yes. So Ibn Sina,
yes.
Avicenna, they made it sound Italian. And then you've got Ibn Rushd and Averroes.
That's right.
All of these things that they did, why did they do that?
Because they literally copied everything without giving the source
credit.
Literally did that. And it goes further than just science. It goes into food, fashion. It goes into
the 1001 inventions, you mean?
Yeah, and more. That those are a minute part of. In fact, if you look at European civilization, it's much more Quranic than biblical. Really,
a lot of
the Renaissance.
The dress code, the culture, the architecture.
Da Vinci and Galilei copied what they found in a treasure chest that Frederick Stupamundi left behind, who had all other Arab scientists in his palace in Sicily. These things are unknown and they are covered up.
Yeah.
There are people write about them, but they are not propagated. They are not well known among us, leave alone the non-Muslims.
Yeah.
So you have to capture the child early on for a fascination with this kind of leaning. Yeah. So it becomes a running and shouting propagator of Islam. And
the elite of Sicily would speak Arabic as it was a superior language.
Yes.
Because they would have, again, all the Arabic manuscripts and all that research Muslims had done and translated.
Yes. Cartography, algebra, medicine, chemistry. I don't have to talk about this even because this is common knowledge. It's just not being propagated. Yeah. It's not on high priority, okay? But that's history. People might say, okay, why don't you forget about it? But then they're happy to say that Islam hasn't contributed anything. Yeah. We have to prove to them that we have. We have to show them how we have. So that's why we have to be fascinated.
Just continue on that. We're just going to go to a break. We'll see you after the break. This is Real Talk with Dr. Deen. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Real Talk. Shariq, tell us a bit more about those questions that people have, maybe about Islam and life itself. So how does Islam benefit anybody? It's a backward religion with all these crazy rules and laws. I don't need it in the modern world. We're living in an era of technology and electric cars and all, even though electric cars are old, 200 years old. But generally, why do I need Islam? I'm a good person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, if you're a Muslim, then you should know that just being a good person isn't enough. In fact, being a good person is in the fitrah of a human being.
What does that mean, fitrah?
In the nature of a human being, so that they feel good about themselves when they do good. So even the non-Muslim, even a non-believer will do good and charity because he feels good about it and shows off with it maybe even. That's why we're asked to give in secret and in open. So in open, or give openly to be a role model to others, and give secretly to have this secrecy between you and Allah, that you did it only for His pleasure and for your own soul. So that's why Prophet ﷺ said, do astaghfar after giving charity, because unless you should feel better about that than the person you've given charity to or helped, right? So the benefit of Islam, why is Islam beneficial? Okay, well, interesting that people should ask that question, because it's in the practice of Islam. if you look at the prayer, if you look at fasting, even now we're reading numerous articles about the benefits of fasting, right? And how beneficial it is. In fact, that reminds me of a scientific sign that I discovered, which is that if you deprive mice of food every second day, it's more beneficial for their health than fasting every day. And that's Prophet ﷺ said that the best fast was that of Dawood alayhi salam, who fasted every second day. So, I mean, you know, that anyway, that's going slightly off topic. So the benefits are in the practice of Islam as well. That's what Islam is beneficial for.
Let's talk about human suffering. There's all this suffering in the world, people starving. What kind of God allows people to suffer?
That's the first question that my atheist friends asked me at school. And I think that is an important question, actually. And I wouldn't blame anyone for asking that question. That's actually a very good question. Allah is all good. Allah means well. Allah loves everyone, right? So why does he cause suffering in the world? Well, you have to understand that from the perspective of a believer, and we believe as believers that is the truth, the hereafter is much more important than this life. This life is a drop in the ocean of the hereafter. So of course this momentous suffering is not an eternal suffering. In fact, you know, if you look at the Prophet ﷺ and his sunnah, and if you look at his hadith, you will see that suffering is actually something that brings you closer to Allah, and that Allah tests those most who are closest to him. Seems like a contradiction, but in fact it's something comparable to a purgatory in life, right? But we also, I mean, some people believe there is that hell won't be eternal. There are scholars who've postulated that hell won't be eternal. People will be washed off their sins and then go to heaven, so to paradise, to Jannah. So it will be a successive progress even after death. But in this life, definitely suffering is part of this life.
Suffering is a part of this life, and it will be justified, i.e. you'll get your payback in the next life if you've suffered.
That's right. And it's limited. And look, the child that's born in a famine-stricken country and dies very young, at a very young age, we believe he or she goes back to Jannah directly. So but you might also argue that we believe in the unseen, right? So you might also argue that, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Surah Al-Kahf, this life is a glittering show to test who is the best in conduct. Now you might argue this show, they are not actually human, they are angels. It's a display. There is that point of view, by the way. It's not absurd, but some people believe that. But I believe that suffering, you know, is encoded in life. And
we also know that suffering actually has many benefits, and people, you only know something good from bad. You can that comparison between a hard time and a good time. You can only enjoy a meal if you've had a horrible one. You can compare it to a good one. So you need that comparison.
That's
also,
right.
People are grateful for their suffering. This is research where people have appreciated the suffering because of what they gained from it.
That's right.
What it improved in their life, what it changed in their life, what their thoughts and understanding were. Now, let's talk about predestiny, because I get youth who may be smoking weed, taking drugs, doing all kinds of stuff. And they're like living the life, you know, and saying, well, it was written by Allah for me to do this anyway. So if Allah knows where I'm going to end up in hell anyway, so I might as well just enjoy myself and do what I want. So what do you say to that?
I've thought a lot about this, and I think everyone thinks a lot about this. So I mentioned that Purgatory Hell, right?
Yeah. What does that mean? Speak simple
So,
English,
I mean,
please.
in the Middle Ages, Christians and other also Muslim theologians postulated that hell is temporary or limited.
Yeah.
And that it will be sort of a washing, a cleansing of your sins, and that then that there will be time for intercession by the Prophet ﷺ after hell as well. So people will be able to get out of hell unless they were the absolute shayateen who are in the seventh hell. So these scholars believe that there are seven hells like there are seven heavens, seven Jannah. So obviously there will be progress after life as well, they say. So I mean, this is very interesting because look, there are two verses in the Quran saying that heaven and earth will last as long as Allah wants, and also hell will last as long as heaven and earth will last. And there's also an ayat saying that hell will only last as long as Allah wants it to last. Right? So there are hints in the Quran that hell might be limited for certain people. And I find that interesting because if you imagine for a second you have free will, to decide what you want. I could now pick up that cup and drink a sip of water, or I might leave it, right? This tree of events that sprouts out is infinite. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also infinite in his wisdom. So why could Allah not have written billions and gazillions of potentialities, parallel universes, multiverse, or the parallel world or many world theory, as they call it?
Yeah.
So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm not saying they exist. You're not a bus driver in another universe. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there's the potentiality for decisions to be made to go in the right direction, or in dua and istikhara with Allah in the right direction. So I believe destiny is written by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like an event tree, like an eternally branched out tree.
But then I can do whatever I want because Allah's already written it, so I might as well continue.
That is like, and scholars have explained that as well. It is a little bit, we cannot understand Allah's creation, never, ever. Okay, we are limited. But if you want a parable, it's the teacher that knows the good student from the bad student. And he still tests them, and he knows who will pass the test, who won't.
Right.
But then again, a very bad student sometimes passes the test. A very bad student does pass. A very good student sometimes fails the test.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that Allah has slight doubt in his creation where someone will end up.
Yeah.
He knows who's going to hell or heaven. And in fact, there is a slight chance of abrogating your destiny during the Laylatul Qadr as well, right? So, this book is still unwritten, but I don't think this is something that should put someone off the faith.
And in this new era where people are saying we're not in a real world, it's a simulation. Yeah. And all these arguments, which is really interesting. A lot of these atheists are allowed to come up with theories and expect people to believe them. But when we say there's a God, they say that's just a theory of, what do they call it? It's like airy-fairy ideas and theology. But when they do that, when they say we're living in a simulation, we're meant to believe that. Yeah, that's right. They say the most absurd stuff as well. But Andrew Tate said that as well. But I think what he meant, and that's interesting, he meant that we're so influenced by the social media and the propagation now, or the narrative, what truth is and what isn't, that we have become essentially brainwashed, and we are slaves without chains. We are basically, consumerism is dazzling us. We're aiming at, earning a lot of money, worldly gain, worldly reputation as well. So it's all temporary. And what I would say to people who think we're living in a matrix already, I would say look at what's actually happening. Look at cloud computing, look at quantum computing, look at nanotechnology, AI. Robotics, AI. So why should it be a fantasy if it's actually potentially happening and evolving? Scientists even say that there are many phases of the evolution, physical evolution, where the elements came into being in the supernova, chemical evolution in planetary clusters cooling down, enthalpy increases, entropy decreases, you get molecules, then there's biological evolution, which has led to us, and now there will be the AI evolution. We have given birth to a new life form, an AI, essentially. That's what's going to happen with AI, and how should Muslims see AI? I personally, and this again, that's where I need to say it's my opinion, but there are many others who have this opinion. I think that AI, nanobotics, cloning, and potentially also particle physics will lead to a summoning, and this is a bit creepy, a summoning of a demon called the Dajjal. Okay. And the Dajjal will be able to come into physical existence through these technologies. That's interesting. So because a lot of these things are demonic. Yes. And so you're saying the AI could lead to the preparation of the world for Dajjal. Absolutely. I am one of the people who believe that, because Prophet ﷺ said there will be 40 Dajjals, right? Let's continue that after the break. This is Real Talk with Dr. Deen and Shariq Ali, the scientist. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Real Talk. When talking about Dajjal, now the Prophet said that Dajjal will appear when people stop talking about him, discussing him. And now people don't talk about Dajjal anymore. So Dajjal, is it a person, a being, or a system, or both? Interesting. So,
what I don't believe is that he's a cyclops who comes and talks. I don't believe he'll appear as a cyclops. What Prophet ﷺ, and the hadiths are quite profound actually. Prophet ﷺ said that he will have an eye like a floating grape, right? And if I look at that hadith, and he will bring a magic with him that will bring distant things close, and he will present two rivers, one of fire, one of water, and you should be jumping as a Muslim into the river of fire. So to me, that is clearly the camera lens and the projection of reality onto people, and the turning upside down of morality and presenting Islam as wrong or bad.
And what people see is not always the truth. We know that with media.
Yes. So he will bring distant things close. That's clearly TV, internet. And Prophet ﷺ also said he's been around since Nuh alayhi salam's time. And there will be 40, major and minor Dajjal. So to me, that it is quite clear that he must be a spirit that possesses people. Possesses,
possesses the mind, right?
The mind. So the Dajjalic system is already there. Yeah. We can see it in front of us. Yeah. In fact, that should strengthen our iman, if anything. We can see those prophecies coming into reality, turning into, especially the towers going up in the desert. We've got endless, right? We've got endless prophecies of Prophet ﷺ coming true. And if you dive deep, your iman gets only stronger. But the Dajjalic system is there. So the preparation for him to be summoned is there. Those families ruling the world from the background, they're there. It's not even secret. Yeah, you won't be even called a conspiracy theorist anymore for saying that.
Yeah, the way I see the world today, when I engage with the Muslim community, is when Dajjal appears, I can see most people believing him because they're not critical thinkers. They'll see him, the news will say he is Christ,
absolutely,
not the Antichrist. And they will say, look, the TV said Dajjal is Christ. He must be Christ. And they'll believe it and follow it. And that's my worry with the Muslims. They're not critical thinkers. They don't have that level of iman
because that wasn't nurtured. As we said earlier on, that critical thinking needs to be nurtured from childhood on. Logical thinking, reasoning, critical thinking. Those are very important properties, but we are shushing the children at that age. So if you nurture that skepticism, that endless chain of thoughts, that exploring of ideas and imagination and creativity, you have to nurture that.
Talking of Dajjal, what are your thoughts on like Freemasonry, Illuminati, all these things?
Yeah, these are just very minor manifestations or followers. We don't know where the top of the pyramid is.
Are there people in the world preparing this world for Dajjal's coming?
Yes.
And getting all that demoralization of the world, corrupting people's ideas, beliefs, values, family values? Do you think there are people doing that?
There are people doing that.
In the background?
They're not even that far in the background, to be quite honest. So, I mean, what I'm totally take exception to is black and white in communities. So I mean, I don't think that it's the Jewish community doing something like that. Yeah. That's nonsense, right?
It's human beings.
Or it's human beings, and Muslims are among them, or so-called Muslims are among them.
Also working for Dajjal.
So
or you could say,
but I could say, one of the manifestations of the Dajjalic system is certainly Zionism. And and a few other ideologies that are dominant. We're even seeing, it's funny enough that they have to do that because both capitalism and communism are manifestations of mass production, right? So, but it's funny that now in a capitalist society, some people are scared of communism, that the billionaires are taking us into communism.
So the Great Reset, we're going back, capitalism is going back to communism with the Great Reset. Own nothing and be happy.
Total confusion. They're just confusing people, and any knowledge that you might have acquired if you'd studied history, they're trying to nullify that or vilify that. So there's no more critical analytical thinking, and there's a lack of actual knowledge. You have an overflow of memes, short attention spam, memes, share, and like, subscribe, and smiley, but the actual depth is missing, right?
Exactly.
So the depth is what we need. The devil is in the detail, but also the distinction away from the devil is in the detail, right? So we need to detail.
That's a very important point, because I find that people now, since the era of the internet, have less knowledge than when we had books.
That's correct.
When we had no access to Google and research papers, people were more knowledgeable about the world than they are today. For those that don't pick up on
I agree, not 100%. Because I still believe in that early childhood nurturing. So those who have that thirst will use the social media and the internet to acquire the knowledge. They don't need books anymore that much. They will have the knowledge in YouTube, long YouTube videos as well, right? So I think the courses are there. You know, if anything, it's more accessible now, but people not accessing it.
But like
right?
you said, most people are not using it.
Yeah.
So people,
because that thirst isn't there.
People are using the internet to post pictures of their holidays, and but not the intellectual stuff. And that's if you use the internet correctly, you'll get the benefit.
Definitely.
I'm going to talk about something about the moon landing. I'll tell you why.
Oh, yeah?
Because this is a debatable thing. Even Netflix had a documentary on it. And the reason why, the props there, the whole shadows, multiple shadows, no stars in the sky. There's all these things out, and there was the race going on, the space race, as you mentioned. And someone wanted to get, and they haven't been back to the moon, in 50 years? And, you know, we researched the oceans, we researched the mountains. So what are your thoughts on, I know you said you believe in the moon landing. There's a lot of people don't believe in moon landing, and they have their reasons. You know, a lot of the astronauts died mysteriously. This is a fact. So, you know, what I'm saying is critical thinking is really important in anything. I say question everything in this world. If you don't question things, you'll never learn that some things are true, some are not. Some things are conspiracies, some are not. But if you don't question everything, that can be a big weakness in today's world of deception. The Prophet said that end of times will be a time of deception. You have to question everything.
True. I mean, I believe in a moon landing because there's evidence. In my opinion, there is evidence. I guess there is also evidence for the other side, but you know, we're sending probes to Mars. We're sending
allegedly.
We've sent satellites to past the solar system.
Yes, within orbit.
Satellites within orbit. But we've sent probes outside of the solar system now, and they're sending back information. I guess there's a limit as to how well we can verify each of us as individuals, whether it's true or not. Right.
I'm bringing it up because people do bring it up. I question a lot of things I see, but let's talk more about now, what are the lessons in life you've learned through your journey through science? What's your advice to the guests on strengthening your faith, using science, not using science, using emotions, all these things? Give us some top tips.
So I think your previous guest said that traveling is really important. And I think traveling is important for us. There was a time when I saw our community here in the UK only traveling back home or to the Hajj. Those were the only two destinations.
Right.
Or then now when they become secular binge drinking holidays in Greece. Well, traveling is a bit more than that, right? So I owned a business in West Africa, and I been to West Africa quite a lot. I drove from here to West Africa in a Jeep alone.
West Africa?
Senegal and Gambia.
Oh, Gambia.
And I drove down there with a Jeep as well.
From here?
Yes, from here. I think every man should do something like that.
What's the journey from England to West Africa to Gambia like in a car?
It's amazing. In a Jeep, you see the change of climates, change of landscapes, change of cultures and people, and beauty of Allah's creation and nature. I mean, that is so overwhelming, right? You get into a state of ecstasy as well when you've got your goal in front of you. You learn so much also in terms of skills, even purely driving skills. I mean, are
the roads
those roads are really bad. Those roads are amazing, though.
What have you learned on your travels?
I've learned on my travels to appreciate people and communicate with people, and I've learned to appreciate Allah's creation and seeing the beauty. It's an eye-opener, it widens your horizon. That's why it's encouraged. That's why Prophet ﷺ traveled so much. And that's why Prophet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands it in the Quran. Travel through the earth and see. What was the end of those people? See how I made creation happen. Go and explore with your eyes again and again. So, I mean, that's one thing, traveling.
Give me some stories from your travels to Africa.
Well, for example, the roads. When you're driving with your Jeep, it was a Toyota Land Cruiser, amazing car, you have potholes because of the heat, the tar bursts. And you have a frequency of them, and then you adopt at a speed, you go at a speed, you don't want to crawl. So you calculate a speed where the bumps are tolerable, right? But then all of a sudden there's a big bump and you don't see it coming. And when the big bump comes, I was actually going parallel to the Paris-Dakar rally when it still took place between Paris and Dakar. And then all of a sudden, you go into the deep pothole that's deeper than the car, and you're coming out, you're just seeing the sky.
Your car fell
falls in the pit hole. You're going at 50 miles an hour, 67 miles an hour, bang! And you see the sky for a few seconds. And you're counting 2, 3, 1, boom!
Wow.
I mean...
What happened then?
And then you go on.
You still
because the car is amazing, and I had to burst tires. I had to dig myself out of the sand. I had to do stuff that was primordial, and that is what makes a man.
But the car can take that hit.
Yes.
So you had
or not.
Yeah.
I had a satellite phone back then. That was in 2005. There was no, mobile phone network there. So I had a Thuraya satellite phone.
Yeah.
I could have just GPSed my data to the insurance, and they would have picked me up with a helicopter.
Yeah.
So that was my last resort.
But you got out.
Other than, yes, I got through, alhamdulillah.
Huge pothole.
7,000 miles. Many huge potholes.
So you were like Fast and
Hundreds
Furious.
of potholes.
You're like Fast and Furious. Your car was in the air flying, literally.
It's in the air
into
flying.
a massive pothole.
Yes.
The car went all the way in.
Yeah, because you can't crawl. If you crawl, you'll never get there.
What car is this? Is it bulletproof?
Yeah, it's a Toyota Land Cruiser.
It is. It's a Toyota Land Cruiser.
If you want to go through the desert.
So
And
Toyota
they
Land Cruiser.
all the other cars were just, maybe Toyota is sponsoring us.
Yeah.
We should get sponsorship from Toyota. But yeah, I heard they've come up with a new battery that will go 1,000 kilometers on one charge in 10 minutes.
Okay,
1,000
let's
kilometers.
wrap up with some amazing advice. Tell us what you want to tell your audience, life advice, what you've learned in your life.
So, so traveling was one, obviously, and knowledge, acquiring knowledge, fascination for knowledge, love for learning, languages, history, arts, science, all sciences, history I didn't mention, philosophy, theology, obviously, not only Islamic theology, look across the border, look into Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, all the others, but those mainly, Taoism, very fascinating. If you want to read a book from another religion which reminds you of the Quran, it's the Tao.
So you
Tao
study other religions to do what?
To become stronger in my iman. It made me stronger in my iman. Nothing ever has made me weaker in my iman when exploring knowledge. So I'm puzzled as to how knowledge, so the knowledge that leads you away from Islam is the narrow tunnel vision that specialization gives you of just knowing one area of whatever.
So open your mind and strengthen your iman.
Multicultural, ethnic, multiracial,
and you're saying that'll make you a stronger
multinational.
Muslim?
That's the future.
That'll make you a stronger Muslim?
That will make us better Muslims.
Thank you, Shariq. We'll see you next time with the next guest. Real Talk with Dr. Deen. Assalamu alaikum.